The amount of times I can say such and such is the worst of the worst is kind of staggering. And it's almost always with someone involved with the Conservative Party. So Priti Patel is the worst of the worst for so many reasons. But today I want to highlight what she recently said. And I'll link the article down below. But she recently said that it's not the government's fault that people are in poverty. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what she said. It's not the government's fault why there's a poverty problem in the UK. Now, generally speaking, if you have a casual approach to politics, if you casually keep an eye on the economy, if you casually look at what politicians are actually proposing and putting into law and putting into legislation, you might think that. But the reality is, no, it is the Conservatives' fault, because they have taken everything away from people who actually stimulate the economy, who stimulate wealth, and give it to those who already have everything and who realistically don't put that much back into the economy. It is the Conservatives' fault that we have universal credits. Universal credits has been condemned by 80 independent groups around the country as being not fit for service and putting people into a far worse situation than they were in to begin with, and that they need to be in now. It is absolutely the Conservatives' fault that they've pushed back the age of retirement with this nonsensical reason. Well, you know, people are living longer, so it's a strain on our NHS, and, you know, people have to be working longer. No, I'm sorry, but that doesn't cut it, because if you look at other countries, that's not what's happening. It is the Conservatives' fault that since 2010 standards in the UK have dropped. And when the United Nations released its investigation into poverty in the UK, it is the Conservatives' fault that they did absolutely nothing and wrote it off as something that had just been fabricated. In fact, Conservatives at the time attacked the author of the report rather than addressing the actual problem. And we've already seen, since 2010, homelessness has risen beyond 160%. Child poverty has risen. Unemployment technically hasn't risen, because when you go through the numbers, at least the government standard numbers, unemployment looks pretty good. But when you start breaking down those numbers, how many people have to work multiple jobs? How many people who were in full-time employment now are on 0-hour contracts and are struggling to get by because they're not getting the hours? How many people are counted as being full-time employed despite the fact that they only work an hour a fortnight? Or even worse, people who are actively seeking employment, but because life happens to get in the way and because the job centre has quotas to meet when it comes to sanctions, they were sanctioned for being a couple minutes late and therefore are removed from the list of actively seeking employment and thus classed as fully employed. Priti Patel is a monster. She is exactly the same as Dominic Raab, Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings, Matt Hancock. They are all liars, thieves, and the worst of the worst. It is absolutely the government's fault, the state this country is in. If you want to change it, for God's sake, don't vote Conservative.